Well, I'm going to talk about something called Bible prophecy vectors. Now, that's probably a little bit of a technical term, but what I want you to grasp is the concept of exponential growth and things happening very quickly, things accelerating. For example, if you're in a car and you're driving and you're getting close to the object in front of you, the closing speed seems to increase the closer that you get. And this is the way that it's going to be with Bible prophecy in the end times. We're going to see more and more things come to pass very quickly. We know that things can change very rapidly. I like the sign about the future, next exit. I put on a little, duct taped a little trouble ahead sign to that because there are troublesome days ahead, especially if you're not a believer. Believers have a great hope. And when we see these things happen, Jesus said we should look up and be glad because our redemption draws nigh. Things change quickly. I don't know if you remember this. This was in January of 2002. A 15-year-old boy stole an airplane down near MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. And to mimic the terrorist on 9/11, just several months before that, flew the plane into an office building in Tampa. Now, I know a little bit about that. My firm has an office in Tampa. In fact, this is my partner Kevin's office that plane landed in. Now, Kevin is a single guy. He's in his 60s. We were joking that nobody's not sure if he's ever had a dog or any other relationship other than with his law practice. He works 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, but this was one day he decided to leave early. It was a Saturday afternoon, and it trashed his office. I went in there a while after it had been rebuilt, and I said, everything smells new in here. And they said, well, this is the one the plane hit. I did not know that until then. This is something that happened just yesterday. Imagine you're driving down a road in Central Asia, in Russia, and I don't know, you're going to get pizza, and you see this thing coming out of the sky, and boom. About 1,000 people injured, a lot of building windows shattered. There were some reports this morning that people in Russia actually started breaking out their own windows in their houses, thinking that the government would compensate them. And then one commentator said, well, this was really supposed to have hit on December 21st, the day of the Mayan apocalypse, but again, the Russian Postal Service was late in delivering. But things change. One thing that I think we all need to get used to is change as we move forward. I've tried to graphically demonstrate this a number of different ways, and I've talked to my friends Jacob and Bill about how to depict it. What I think we're going to see in the future is we know that there's all these different Bible prophecy pictures, lines of Bible prophecy. And all of those converge in the future at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And as we get closer to that time, it will be similar to a vortex. Things will get very turbulent in the world. I don't think at this point that we're going to go back to the way things were. We have a whole government that's dedicated to change. We'll talk about some of these. A lot of this is focused on, of course, the land of Israel. This is looking from down across Syria to Israel to the south, and you can see the Red Sea all the way down there in the distance, the Sinai Peninsula. That's where a lot of what we're going to see happens. Jesus talks some about what would happen in the end times. One concept to grasp in Bible prophecy is that prophecy is based on a pattern. What happened in the past is a teaching to us about what will happen in the future. That's a Jewish way of looking at the scriptures, a pattern. You look for a pattern in the past. For example, Joseph is a type of Christ. So what happened to Joseph will be a picture of what happened to Jesus as the Messiah when he came. David is a type of Christ, and that gives a picture of Jesus' kingly role. All of these things are set out in Scripture in the Old Testament for our instruction. And Jesus himself, Jesus was Jewish, and he used the same method of teaching to his disciples and to us. So in Luke chapter 17, he gave us two examples of a pattern that we should look at and be aware of and understand to know what will happen in the future. And he said this in verse 26 of Luke chapter 17, and just as it happened in the days of Noah, so it will also in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. There were a lot of things that happened at that time. For in those days, as I said, they were eating and drinking, and they did not understand that the flood took and came them all away. And that's what it's going to be like at the time that the Son of Man comes. Now look, there's a lot of people that teach that, well, there's really no more signs that are going to happen before the rapture. I disagree strongly with that. Because Jesus himself said that in the end times, you're going to see things happen just like they were in the days of Noah. So people are going to be going merrily along. And sometimes I'm struck at my colleagues, frankly, that everything's the same, nothing's going to get worse. Oh, the economy's collapsing, but you know, our bankruptcy department will make money off of that. And I actually do, that's my specialty, is commercial property foreclosures. So business has been good for the last 5 or 6 years, and I expect it to be good for a substantial distance into the future. But when Noah was here, it took him over 100 years to build the ark. During that time, he was preaching. So there were some signs that were happening for the people that were there, that there was a judgment coming if they just paid attention. There was a big boat that hadn't been there before. As they got closer to the time, a bunch of animals started showing up, 2 by 2, sometimes in 7s. Now, if you see that happen, I would think that most people would say, hey, what's going on? But we know that from Scripture of what were probably, I don't think there's any question about this, given fertility rates before the flood, there might have been twice as many people, certainly 1.5 times the number of people that there are on the planet today at the time of the flood. Very easy to get up to a population of 9 billion. That's, I believe, a conservative estimate. People lived a long time. They had a lot of children. But when people saw all these things coming, what did they do? Did they do anything about it? Well, the Scripture tells us that only 8 people, Noah and his family, made it. You should understand that what Scripture tells us is that the biblical motif for the people who get rescued is always a small, faithful remnant. Unfortunately, many people refuse to see the truth of what's happening around them, even though it's clearly laid out in Scripture. But Jesus himself taught that the way is narrow. The broad way is the way that leads to destruction, and people seem to ignore the signs that are all around them. The other example that Jesus gave in Luke chapter 17 was the same as happened in the days of Lot. And again, they were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, they were building. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. That's a picture of what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. The militant, blatant, open homosexuality and the perversion in that culture will be a picture of what it will be like in the end times. I can tell you that I just had it 3 weeks ago, every 3 years, working in a big law firm, I have to go through harassment training. And now it's getting to the point, and I have friends in some big bank corporations who said that they're being asked to sign documents that not only will they not speak out against homosexuality, but they will support it actively, gay marriage and those sorts of things. And I have a friend, he pastors a church in Columbus, and he has said, I know that someday I'm going to have to leave the bank that I work at because I can't in good conscience sign that anymore. Good friend of mine, a pastor in Southern California, was one of the leading proponents of Proposition 8. In fact, we happened to have breakfast the morning after that was ruled unconstitutional. It was very troubling to him and to me that the openly homosexual judge in San Francisco had made that ruling. This pastor told me that he had been told by the FBI during the campaign that he needed to get a bodyguard because there were active death threats against him because he supported Proposition 8, traditional marriage. Those type of things I think are going to increase. And in fact, if you look in 2 Peter, where it describes what Lot was going through, I think it's 2 Peter 3, Lot was feeling oppressed. He was tired. He was worn out. And then when all that happened, then the rescue came. So that is a picture of what it will be like for us in the end times. So you need to get used to it, stand fast, get in the Word, get in good fellowship with other believers, and support each other, because this is, I'm afraid, our lot in life, so to speak. That as it was in the days of Lot, so will it be. And in fact, remember, in Genesis chapter, you can read about the story of Lot in Genesis chapter 19, but in Genesis chapter 18, remember Abraham tried to bargain with God and said, God, if I can find 50 or 40, 30, 20, 10, if I could find just 10 righteous men in that area, would you postpone your judgment? And God said, sure, but there weren't 10 righteous men in the city of Sodom or Gomorrah. And so God sent his judgment. But again, when Jesus taught, his picture was that what it was like then is what it will be like for you who live in the end. The concept of exponential growth. There is an old Chinese proverb, at least they say it's an old Chinese proverb, and usually that's what, I think it actually is an old English thing that came up, but they said it's an old Chinese proverb because then people would listen to it. But the guy who invented chess went to the emperor, and the emperor said, this is a fantastic game that you've invented, this chess. It's phenomenal, it's intellectual, it's fun, it's competitive. What can I do for you? Anything you want. And the inventor said, well, I'll tell you what, king or emperor, every day, first day I want you to give me a grain of rice. King says, well, there's no problem with that. And I want you, the next day I want you to double it, and then double it, and then double it again. So as the king gets down here a little ways, it's not too bad. You get halfway through, though, and you're up to about, the person having accumulated all that rice now gets 2 billion grains of rice one day. It increased extremely rapidly. Yankee Stadium. What does this have to do with Bible prophecy? I know what you're thinking. Let's do an experiment. Let's take our next speaker. And I'm going to be going for about 50 more minutes, probably. So let's chain Mike to the next to the top row at Yankee Stadium. And we're going to make Yankee Stadium watertight. Now, this is an attractive example for me because I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and the Indians were always losing to the Yankees. So there's a lot of hostility and anger built up there. So let's make Yankee Stadium watertight. And we're going to take a magic eyedropper, and we're going to drop, it's totally watertight. The water won't absorb. We're going to drop a drop of water, just a normal drop of water, at second base. And then every minute, we're going to double it. So the second at minute 2, we drop 2 drops of water. So now there's 3 drops of water there. Then we drop 4 drops of water. Then we drop 8 drops of water, then 16, and on and on and on. Now, how long do you think that Mike has before he needs to get loose from that next to the last row at the top of the stadium? Weeks? Actually, I told you I was speaking about 50 more minutes. He would be drowning before then. In fact, when you get out to about 40 minutes, the stadium is still 97% empty. At about 48 minutes, it's full, and that means at 47 minutes, it's only half full. There are many other examples I could give for you on this. This is an example of folding a paper, just a regular piece of, normal piece of paper. And let's say we could fold it multiple times. And as we fold it and fold it and fold it, it's 0.02 centimeters thick. And, so then the next time we fold it will be 0.04, then 0.08 centimeters thick. And I don't want to necessarily go through the whole video, but how many folds do you think it takes to, well, at about 17 folds, I think it's coming up here. At 10 folds, okay, it's 2 to the 10th times 0.02 centimeters, and that comes out to 1.024 centimeters. That's less than half an inch. That's after folding it 10 times. Okay, if I fold it 25 times, it's about the height of it's about a quarter mile. It's almost the height of the Empire State Building. And at 47 folds, you can see how the exponential growth, goes more quickly, more quickly, more quickly. 47 folds, it goes from the Earth to the moon. Oh, by the way, 48 fold gets you all the way back. That's the concept of exponential growth. And that is what Jesus said would happen in the last days. That thing would accelerate and happen much more quickly. This is a video of the tsunami on Boxing Day 2004 in Thailand. This couple went out to go boating, and they got there and the water disappeared.
As a student tourist, thought this was quite fun.
And nobody knows what's going on. You can see them, they're standing around, where'd the water go? Somebody pull a plug in the ocean?
It took maybe just a few minutes around the time that the water disappeared and then it started coming back.
And all of a sudden the water starts to come in. Now just a little bit before that, well, let me get back here. In a town just about 15 minutes south of there, this was the scene as the ocean drained away. Now, I think this is a perfect picture of what it's going to be like in the end times. And you can see the people are there, they're walking around. The reefs are exposed. They're out walking along the reefs. It's like, oh, what happened to the water? Where did it go? It just went out all of a sudden. I've never seen the tide go out like that. All that used to be underwater, almost all the way up to the trees.
There was a sense of calm. There was no sense of panic whatsoever.
Now they see a white cap in the
You
distance.
see forming up from left to right, a beautiful crest on the horizon,
quite lovely. We were spellbound looking at it. But at that time, there was no way to know how big the wave was.
But look at the people, they're still standing around looking at it.
I filmed to see again and again. But this I was especially fascinated about it. Come on, I didn't see you as well, bitch. What's that up? I said to myself, hey, what a perfect wave. But the need not be.
Nah, the earthquake didn't do anything to it. We should warn the tourists. See the people standing down there looking at it? But now look what happens. The local people start running away. Earlier he had said, boy, look, the military boats are here, everything's okay. A tsunami?
The moment I realized that we were really going
And I just went straight over one of the ships.
And then we all know what happened. Earthquake had happened hours before near Indonesia, well into about 8.8 strength earthquake, very strong. Hours later, it reached Thailand, where this was filmed. It then went on to Sri Lanka. About 350,000 people died that day, including many of the people that you probably saw walking around in the bay there looking at the pretty reefs that they'd never been able to see before. They didn't understand what was coming. 32,000 people died in Sri Lanka, which was 1,000 miles away from where the earthquake happened. It was a tragedy. Over 200,000 people in Banda Aceh in Indonesia died in a very short time. And this video, you can find it on Netflix or Amazon. It's heart-wrenching as you see the people going around who come back after having been out on a boat and coming back and looking for their teenage children, then finding one of the men finding his picture of his dead daughter on the board. It was a tragedy. People didn't understand what was happening. There was a flood coming, and they were unaware. Now, there were some people there, oh, maybe we should warn them. In fact, there's a story, a great story of a 15-year-old girl who had read about tsunamis and studied it just recently in her school in either England or America. And when she saw the water drain out of the ocean, she told her family, we need to get to high ground. And they all survived because she understood what was coming. Again, I can't think of a better picture of the last days for the Christian who should be warning people about what's coming, and the people who are there who need to, if I could use the term, if they're not Christians, they need to turn and run and flee what's coming. Flee the coming wrath. They need to turn and repent. So Jesus gives us these pictures about Noah when a flood came, Lot when the things came out of the sky, the fire and brimstone, and destroyed the city. All of those are warnings. There were clear signs that judgment was coming, but the vast majority of people ignored them. Things change. This is an older community. This was in The Guardian 2 weeks ago. The new Japanese finance minister said that the elderly should be allowed to hurry up and die to relieve pressure on the state to pay for their medical care. If you think that's just unique to Japan, you need to get this book. It's by Jonathan Last. He works for the Wall Street Journal. I can't remember the name of it. It talks about our demographic crisis. You know, in Japan, they don't have babies. You need to have 2.1 children per fertile female to have replacement, just to stay even in your population. Japan's birth rate is somewhere around 1.3. That means that in one generation, they will lose about half of their population. Now, how do you think that's going to work with an aging population that's going to be expecting more young people to help pay for health care and those type of things? In America, among educated women, college-educated women, the birth rate is now 1.6. We've relied on immigration for a lot of years to make up the shortfall that we've been having, and it's sort of masked it for us. But you know that where Mexico used to have a birth rate of 6.7, they're now down to about 2.2 or 2.3, which means there's not going to be a lot of people coming up north here to take care of things and to be taxpayers. Now, I'm not saying that to scare you. I've heard that in Japan they sell more adult diapers than baby diapers. But you see how quickly that changed? While we were aging, the world changed. All the assumptions that we used to operate on have changed. One change I've noticed is I'm 58 for another week. But my wife is 60. I still feel fortunate that I have a beautiful woman for my wife. But in just this short generation of time, things like, I can remember, I love to play golf. I'm playing golf one day with a businessman, and he is 75. And as we're starting the 9th hole, his phone rings and he says, I have to leave after we're done with this hole. I have to go take care of my mother. Now, that may not seem unusual to you, but a generation ago, 75-year-old men, it was very, 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 very rare that they would have a parent still alive. I mean, he's been retired for 10 years and his mother's still alive. This is a huge change in a generation, but now we're not having the babies on the other end. So the population is aging, and it's going to cause problems in the future if the Lord doesn't come. There's a great prophecy in the Bible, Daniel's 70 weeks, and I see that I'm running short on time, so I won't go into the details. But one of the things that you find is that there was a prophecy that said that there was 70 weeks appointed for the people of Israel. And at the end, there'd be a group of 69 weeks of years, and there would be a week of 7 years. A week of years at the end. And it was very precise. It predicted to the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey on Palm Sunday. You can work backward from that and get to the decree of Xerxes back in 445 BC and go forward the exact number of days, 173,880 days, and you get to the day that Messiah the Prince was presented in Jerusalem, and a week later, Jesus was killed. But what you find when you study the prophecies about Messiah's first coming is that those prophecies existed for a long time. Let me show you what I mean. For example, the earliest prophecy was that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. That was given, let's just say, 4000 BC. Then there was the prophecy in Genesis 49, Jacob's prophecy to Joseph's sons, that the scepter would not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. And we know historically that the power was taken away from the ruling authority after Jesus was born. In fact, when it was taken away, one of the Talmud says that one of the rabbis said, this is the Messiah hasn't come yet. And the power is being taken away. Our scepter, our ability to rule ourselves is being taken away. But Jesus had already been born. They just didn't recognize him. But then there was the prophecy about Jesus Christ's crucifixion and what he would suffer that. You can see that, and that was given about 1000 BC. Then there were prophecies that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. There are hundreds of prophecies about Jesus' first coming, just as there are many, many hundreds of prophecies about his second coming. In 700 BC, Isaiah wrote that the Messiah would suffer. Isaiah chapter 53 was pierced for our transgressions. And it describes in excruciating detail the things that the Messiah would go through in a method of execution that really was unknown at that time. In 450 BC, as the Old Testament is closing, Malachi wrote that Elijah would come before the Messiah. Then there's 400 silent years. Some things, a lot of significant things happened there. The Maccabees, Antiochus Epiphanes, who desecrated the temple about 167 BC. But then Bible prophecies started being fulfilled. There was the announcement to Zechariah that he was going to have, when he was in the temple doing his priestly service, that he was going to have a son. And that son turned out to be the man who came in the spirit of Elijah. Of course, then shortly after that, the angel appeared, Gabriel appeared to Mary and said that she was going to give birth to the Messiah. And in the first, by most estimates, in the first, from that time of the announcement to Zechariah to Jesus presenting himself as Messiah, about 38%, 40%, let's call it, of the messianic prophecies about his first coming were fulfilled in roughly a 33-year period, 40%. The other 60%, though, were fulfilled in the last week of his life. So you see the exponential increase in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. So, if pattern is right, and as Jacob Prasch, I've heard him say many times, if you want to know what's going to happen at the time of Jesus' second coming, look at what happened at the time of his first coming. So if all these prophecies had been around, some for thousands and thousands of years, are suddenly fulfilled in a very stretched out over a 30-year period, and then in 1 week, over half of them fulfilled that time, don't you think that it's likely that at the last time, at the end of time, at the second coming of the Messiah, that Bible prophecy will be fulfilled the same way? That there will be a little bit fulfilled, then it might slow down for a while, and then there will come like a flood, a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And so in this 70th week, particularly, I've said to Mike many times, a great teaching would be the week in the middle of that 70th week. There's just a tremendous amount of things happening that fulfill Bible prophecy that you can read about in all the Old Testament prophets. And it'll happen in a very short period of time. The increase will be exponential in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. The first city was Babylon. And Babylon was located in the land of Shinar, which is modern-day Iraq. And you know the story. I won't go to the Tower of Babel. What happened at that time? That they were going to build a city. They were going to build themselves up so that they would be God. That was one of the things that happened at the beginning, man's first rebellion against God. Do you think it will be a picture of the last rebellion against God? That man will think that they can build themselves up as gods. It's happening now. Just as you saw in the video, what was predicted is happening. 1 year ago, February 25th, 2011, or 2012. This was the cover of Time magazine. Anybody see this? 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Now, I have a friend, his name is Martine Erdman, and he, along with a man named Patrick Wood, And by the way, there are sheets in the back. If you want to give me your email address, I'll send you some of the websites that I check and some of the information that I have. Martina Erdman and Patrick Wood are experts in a subject known as transhumanism. Martine had an opportunity to work at one of the leading research facilities in the world, the University of Basel in Switzerland, where he was, by happenstance, it's a long story, he just happened to be, somebody came to him and said, do you have time? We want you to pay you money to be the medical ethicist on this subject of transhumanism. And he said, sure. The things that he has heard, that he knows, that he has seen, that we've sat and talked about are absolutely frightening as to what people are doing, because this is the Tower of Babel in modern form. People think that they will become as gods. This is based, a lot of this is based on the work of a man named Ray Kurzweil. He invented one of the music synthesizers, but he's a futurist, and he sees this, and he thinks that by 2045, the technology will be there to merge man and machine and create a superhuman that will be immortal. In fact, he doesn't believe, and he's not an idiot. This guy has degrees and awards beyond my comprehension. And he said he doesn't think, if I die, it's not going to be, I'll be brought back as a cyborg or something. They'll reconstitute my DNA. If you look, the growth of technology, remember the first IBM there in the lower left-hand corner, the first IBM PC? And then that one in the middle, that box, that was the first laptop that I had back in 1993. I used to carry it around. The battery would last for about 4 minutes. It weighed about 18 pounds, and it had that little screen. You could see 3 or 4 lines in gray and not so gray. Now, you carry around a cell phone that has millions of times the computing power of what entire networks used to have. This is a commercial from Verizon.
Introducing Droid DNA by HTC. It's not an upgrade to your phone, it's an upgrade to yourself.
Now that commercial just came out within the last few weeks. The transhumanism movement has become mainstream. It's a sign of the end times, and it's increasing by the moment. And if you don't think that the elite in Washington have designs on how they're going to implement this, then we need to talk afterwards. But the prophecy of 70 weeks, there's a whole purpose for the prophecy of 70 weeks: to make an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. And then we know that the Messiah was going to come, and he was going to be cut off at the end of the 69 weeks. And then it talks about a covenant being made that starts off that last week. I want to look at it in a slightly different way, though. There is a prophecy. Ezekiel wrote, he was in Babylon at the time of the Babylonian captivity, and he wrote some prophecies. And one of the prophecies he gave was about the period of judgment that the children of Israel would undergo. And the picture that he was given, he was supposed to lie on his side for, it says here, I've assigned you a number of days corresponding to the years of their iniquity, 390 days. So for 390 days, he was supposed to lie on one side, then he was supposed to turn over, lay there for another 40 days. So 390 and 40 is how many? 430, right? Now Daniel, in Leviticus chapter 26, though, there's also this word from the Lord, that if the children of Israel don't do what I've told you, I'm going to punish you 7 times for what you've done. So now remember, Ezekiel said punishment would be, he had to lay on his side, then turn over. Total 430 days. That's the period that the children of Israel were going to be punished by the Lord because of what they'd done when they got into the land. They hadn't followed the Sabbath. They hadn't done what they were supposed to do. So God was going to punish them. 1 year for each day. But there's also this admonition or this statement, these statements in Leviticus 26. It's repeated 4 times that if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to punish you 7 times. I think my mother followed this one when I was growing up. And in Leviticus 26 says, all the days of its desolation, talking about the land. See, it says, then the land will enjoy its Sabbaths, all the days of the desolation. So you're not going to follow the Sabbath years. Every 7th year you're supposed to let the land lie follow. Every 50th year is a year of Jubilee you're supposed to let. Since you violated that, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to take you out of the land, and the land's going to get its Sabbath years all in one shot. So the Babylonian captivity started about 606 BC. And it was going to end about 537 BC. And Daniel chapter 9, before he gets to the 70 weeks prophecy, Daniel gives a good example of how Christians should look at Bible prophecy. This is what attorneys say, sidebar comment. You know, have you seen the thing where the attorney says, Your Honor, can I have a sidebar? And, you run up to the bench and nobody knows what goes on up there. You want to know what goes on up there? One time the judge said, hey, do you mind if we take a bathroom break? I don't feel so good right now. Or where are you guys going to eat for lunch? It's sometimes it's not this great legal argument that's going on. It's just, but we call it sidebar, then it makes it look, but sidebar comment, this is actually pretty important. One of the signs of the end times is the fact that most churches, most pastors, unfortunately, and I see this as I travel around, I hear people in conferences like this talk about it all the time. My pastor never talks about Bible prophecy. The fact that he doesn't is a sign of the end times. People don't want to talk about any of this. But Daniel, he wasn't like that. In fact, Daniel, what it says in the early part of Daniel chapter 1 is he was reading the prophet Jeremiah. And as he's reading the prophet Jeremiah, he says, oh, we're going to be out of the land for 70 years, and that time is about coming up. And it's about time for the prophecy to end. So what did Daniel do? Did Daniel ignore Bible prophecy? No, he got on his knees and he prayed, God, he repented, we've sinned, and please fulfill your prophecy and restore us to the land just like you have said. O Lord, listen, Daniel 9:19. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, listen and take action. For your own sake, O my God, do not delay, because your city and your people are called by your name. God, Daniel said, your word is at stake. Fulfill your prophecy. And Daniel was sure that it was going to happen, and God revealed tremendous things to him. The prophecies in Daniel are so precise that people thought that they were history written after they happened, instead of prophecy written before. But if you take this prophecy of Ezekiel and the fact that they're out of the land for 70 years, now they've got 360 years left that they still have to be punished. But let's just speculate and say, what happens if God increases that by 7? Okay? What happens? We know a biblical year is 360 days, and if you take 360 times 7, you come up with 2,520 years. 2,520 years times 360 days is 907,200 days. So if we start back at the time of the Babylonian captivity, and we go forward 907,200 years, you'll see, I'll show you in a moment where we end up. 1917, we have the Balfour Declaration. We have the British Mandate. That originally, by the way, in the dark area was what the Jews were supposed to have. That was changed in 1922 to where the land was divided. Everything west of the Jordan, San Remo Conference, never overturned by any vote by any chance. The nations of the world decided that the Jews should have that as a homeland. And the Arabs will have Transjordan. Okay, so let's go. Start at the captivity in 537 BC and the servitude of the nation. If you go forward 2,520 years, you come to May 14th, 1948. And that was the day that David Ben-Gurion stood in the museum in Tel Aviv. And here's just a short video about that. This is 3 years after they found the death camps.
On that same
Just 3 years.
5,708, May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion arrived at the Tel Aviv Museum building. His entire life had been directed towards this very moment. This right is the natural right of the Jewish people to be masters of their own fates, like all other nations, in their own sovereign state. We should open the gates of the homeland wide to every Jew, and confer upon the Jewish people the status of a fully privileged member of the community of nations. Accordingly, we members of the National Executive, representatives of the Jewish community of Israel and of the Zionist movement, are here assembled on the day of the termination of the British mandate over Israel. And by virtue of our natural and historic rights, and the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, here declare the establishment of a Jewish state in Israel, to be known as the State of Israel. The State of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will be based on freedom, justice and peace, as instituted by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education and culture.
Yes, Lord, I will. Since then, I don't believe that I accept Jesus. I had associations with my childhood in America. We learned in school about the Declaration of Independence. Over there, the child knows his preamble by heart and knows the good men who signed it. And here am I, signing the Declaration of Independence.
This is the original historic recording of Antifa, the Jewish national anthem, played by the Philharmonic Orchestra at the conclusion of the independence ceremony. Now, for the first time, the words "to be a free nation in our own land" became a reality. The appeal to the Jewish people throughout the diaspora will rally around the Jews of Israel in the past of immigration confusion and uprooting. I stand by them in the great struggle for the realization of the age-old dream, the redemption of Israel.
Fulfilled to the day. In 1964 at Masada, they were doing an excavation, and they found a scroll, and when they turned it over and read it, they found a quote from Ezekiel chapters 37 about the prophecy of the dry bones. Okay, I'm going to take Mike Clapham is teaching after me, and he knows me, so he knows that I'm going to go over. Just if you don't mind, I'm going to go over just a few more minutes. This is an incredible time to be alive. The way everything is happening, the alignment of the nations, the Arab Spring. I could go for, and believe me, I could go for hours and hours about a lot of these things. Let me just jump ahead. What's that? You'll need dinner? Hang on a second here. Oh, I have all this good stuff. You know, this is significant. Tower of Babel was in the land of Shinar. Nimrod, the first king who led the rebellion against God at the Tower of Babel. There's a prophecy in Zechariah chapter 4 that talks about a woman in a basket, and the lid's put on the basket, and she's taken to what land? The land of Shinar. You can read about it in Zechariah chapter 4. And the lid's put on until the time of the end. And I think that's the woman that then comes out of the desert riding the beast in Revelation. In from the desert. It says, and not talking about the woman, but it talks about this flying scroll. This is the curse that goes throughout all the earth at the end times. You know what the word for curse is there? It's the Hebrew word, and it's pronounced Allah. Now, I'm making it up. Now, look, it could be a coincidence, but God doesn't usually deal that way. This rise of Islam is something that we all need to be aware of. It's infiltrating our government. The sympathetic to and the inability of people in our government to discuss what that religion really is absolutely stunning. This is a picture of the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, actually about 1925, before Saudi Arabia was Saudi Arabia, by the way. Do you know it's not been around that long? At that time, you could get 10 or 20,000 people in the Grand Mosque. To show you how Islam has grown, both in wealth and numbers, this is the Prophet's Mosque. This is where Muhammad is buried, where his dead body's still alive, by the way. He's not alive like the Messiah. That mosque will accommodate 500,000 people at one time. That's in Medina. In Mecca, the Grand Mosque today looks like this. Now, I don't know if you know this, there's this giant clock tower in hotel and apartments. This building down here is the Royal Palace, but that clock tower behind the Grand Mosque, and by the way, the Grand Mosque will now accommodate 2 million people at one time, to give you some idea of the scope, and to give you some idea of the size of that tower. That's what it looks like. It is, if you look at the tall buildings, the ones that have actually been built, the Burj Al Dubai in Dubai, another Islamic country, is the tallest, about 2,500 feet. That clock tower right now, the buildings that have finished, is the second tallest building on the planet. It's 600 feet taller, I think, than the Empire State Building, or, well, it used to be called the Sears, I'll call it the Sears Tower until I'm out of here, because I don't remember what the new name is, in Chicago. used to be our tallest building. It's taller than that building. I think that's significant. There are plans, this is an artist schematic of what the clock tower would be off to your right. This is what they plan to build on the other side. And that when they get that done, the Grand Mosque will accommodate 5 million people at one time. Do you think they have plans to grow? This building sits on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Inside is an inscription, I've seen it myself, that says, God has no son. A blasphemous statement at what was the site of God's temple, not the Jews' temple, God's temple. Our president went to Cairo, Egypt, June 4th, 2009. You need to go to the White House website, read the transcript, watch the video. This is prophetically, geopolitically, one of the most significant speeches of your lifetime, my lifetime, and lifetimes to come. This is what he said at that.
Too many tears have been shed. Too much blood has been shed. All of us have a responsibility to work for the day when the mothers of Israelis and Palestinians can see their children grow up without fear. When the Holy Land of the three great faiths is the place of peace that God intended it to be. When Jerusalem is a secure and lasting home for Jews and Christians and Muslims, and a place for all of the children of Abraham to mingle peacefully together. As in the story of Israel. As in the story of Israel when Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them, joined in prayer.
Times Man of the Year last year, or that identified as the most important man in the Middle East. Mohammed Morsi, a man who, don't have time to play it, before he became president of Egypt, referred to Jews as the descendants of apes and pigs, then said that his comments were taken out of context. By the way, the Muslim Brotherhood was a banned organization in Egypt, but they were invited to the speech that Obama gave in Egypt on June 4th, 2009, legitimizing the organization, and I and a lot of other people believe leading ultimately to the revolutions that we've seen sweeping the Middle East, known as the Arab Spring, as Islamists take over country after country after country. Thanks in great part to our president and our State Department. Well, I don't have time to play that, but this Islamic revolution is rising. Syria is melting down. I have been told by friends who have sources within the Israeli military, in fact, there was just a report I saw this morning that fighting had erupted in the Golan Heights. Right across from, if many of you have gone to the overlook there at the Golan Heights where you overlook the no man's land, just on the other side of those fences, fighting was erupting between rebel forces and the Syrian army. Israel is watching this. They took out a convoy that was heading over to the Bekaa Valley, likely carrying chemical weapons. Of course, nobody talks about it. Israel, the word I got from Israel this week was, we're not messing around. Anything goes wrong, go read Isaiah 17. You know what Isaiah 17 says? An oracle against Damascus. Damascus will be a heap of rubble and will cease to exist. Do you know that today the oldest continuously occupied city on planet Earth is Damascus, Syria? That prophecy has never been fulfilled. I'm telling you right now that there are moves afoot that if things go wrong with the chemical weapons, Israel will not hesitate. They will not allow what happened under Hitler to happen again. And they know that that's what they face from these Islamic armies that would overrun them in a minute if they could. But our government seems to be supporting it. Our new the guy who's up for CIA director is John Brennan. He gave a speech at NYU a number of years ago. Go look it up on YouTube and watch it. And tell me, do you think he's maybe not converted to that faith? There are reports that he has. I can't verify them. I did contact some people in DC and asked them, and they said, don't know, but you sent me a video a couple years ago, and that sure sounds like he did when he talks in that video. Talks about what a great peaceful religion Islam is. And he's going to head up the CIA unless the Republicans stop it. I could go on. One other prophecy that I want to tell you about, though. Remember we told you about the servitude of the nation, and if you start from the time they went back to rebuild the walls, and you go forward 2,520 years, you come to May of 1948 when Israel was reborn. If you do the same thing with regard to when the walls were finished building in 519 BC, and you come forward 2,520 biblical years of 360 days, you end up in June of 1967, when Israel reunited the city of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War. So the question is, you can accept whether we live at that time or you can reject it. Without being harsh, you can be like the people who are walking around the bay at the time of the tsunami. Oh, look at the pretty white cat. Isn't it interesting? We never can walk around among the reefs. The ocean went away. Is that coming towards us? Wow, look at the pretty fish laying over there. This is a picture of what it will be like in the end times. And so the obligations on Christians is to see that coming and to warn people about what's coming. Not to have self-help classes and to have America's pastor appear on Oprah Winfrey's Life class and give good advice. He needs to call the church to repentance. And if you're not a Christian, you now know that the tsunami's coming. And what are you going to do? You're just going to stand there and let it overtake you? Or are you going to turn like those Thai people did and run and flee and put your faith in Jesus Christ? Or, like Noah did, get on the ark. Get on the ark of Jesus. That's a choice. This is a very exciting time to be alive. It's very troubling. Literally, I could go for hours about economic problems and all the things. All of these things seem to be happening at once. I have a number of friends who are professional Bible prophecy teachers, and every one of them, as I talk to them over the last couple of months, says, I can't keep up. Too much is happening. Yeah, it's growing exponentially because now this is the time. And you have to decide if you're a Christian, are you going to warn people? And if you're not a Christian, are you going to put your faith in Jesus Christ? Thank you very much. We're going to take